Alright brain crafters, here's the lowdown. Elon Musk, the real-life Iron Man, visionary behind Tesla, SpaceX, and that super funky Neuralink. Clearly, the man's brilliant, but he's also, well, a tad peculiar, right?
Elon Musk.
Back in college, way before the billions and rocket ships, there was Justine. Picture a young Elon, mustering up courage outside Justine's dorm. With a serendipitous chance encounter, he casually bumped into her by accident and invited her for ice cream. Plot twist, Elon shows up, only to be greeted by a note, signaling he was stood up. Now, most would call it a day, maybe even feel a bit depressed, right? But not Elon. His dedication, bordering on obsession, pushes him to the next logical step in tracking down Justine's best friend and then finding out Justine's usual study spot and her favorite ice cream flavor. The very same evening, imagine her surprise when she's deep in her Spanish textbooks and who appears with melting chocolate chip ice creams? That's Elon. Relentless pursuit of a narrow interest, even in the face of rejection or aloofness, without really considering the other person's wishes or opinions. Don't take it from me, here's what Justine had to say about Elon's behavior in those early days. You always knew it was Elon because the phone would never stop ringing. The man does not take no for an answer. You can't blow him off. I think of him as the Terminator. He locks his gaze onto something and says, "It shall be mine." Bit by bit, he won me over.
Shall be mine.
What about his behavior in the present? A former employee spilled the beans saying Elon can sometimes treat people like ammo, use, exhaust, discard. He further said, "Many of us worked tirelessly for him for years and were tossed to the curb like a piece of litter without a second thought." Elon's worst trait by far, in my opinion, is a complete lack of loyalty or human connection. Elon's peculiar tendencies aren't just limited to his persistent chase and romance or his work-hard attitude towards his employees. When presented with emails, he often obsesses on typos, to the point that he can no longer respond to the primary message. In social gatherings, Musk sometimes left the dinner table without any explanation, opting to gaze at the stars. Was he offended? Not really. He just can't stand small talk or topics outside his sphere of interests. But let's pump the brakes here. Diagnosing someone based on quirks or being different, especially in a place like Silicon Valley, can be hasty and uninformed. Can't a genius just enjoy the stars without a label? Now, to better understand these behaviors, let's delve into the insights of mental health professionals and examine the DSM criteria for Asperger's syndrome. There are 5 criteria in DSM-IV, the revised edition. 1. Social interaction issues. Some people might not understand facial expressions or gestures well, like not knowing when someone is sad or happy just by looking at them. They might not understand how to give and take in friendships. 2. Repetitive behaviors. They might really like one thing and talk about it a lot, like loving dinosaurs or rockets, and only wanting to talk about them all the time. They like routines a lot. If they do something one way, they want to do it that way every time. Could repeat certain movements, like waving hands or twirling fingers.
I like to move it. I like to move it.
3. Daily life challenges. These issues make it hard for them in school, work, or other important places. 4. Language skills. Normally acquired and can be summarized with 2 concepts. Restricted prosody. Their voice might not change its tone much. For example, they might not sound excited when talking about something they love. One-sided verbosity. Might talk a lot about a favorite topic without realizing the listener might want to talk about something else. 5. Learning and curiosity. They learn and are curious about the world like everyone else, but shows their interest differently. They may dive deep into a specific topic they're interested in, gathering an impressive amount of information. They might talk about their specific interest at length, even if the listener isn't showing interest. They might physically engage with their interest in unique ways, like arranging things related to their interest in a specific order or pattern.
To figure out why electrons behave as if they have no mass.
DSM-V made significant changes to the classification of autism spectrum disorders, ASD. One of the most notable shifts was the elimination of distinct subcategories, including Asperger's disorder. Instead, the DSM-V now places everything under the umbrella of autism spectrum disorder. So, there's no longer a separate set of criteria specifically for Asperger's in the DSM-V. So, could Mr. Musk be on the autism spectrum? It's essential to note that for a diagnosis of neurodivergent conditions, like ASD, symptoms must present in the early developmental period. This essentially means we can't diagnose him at this moment. We can only watch his present actions and make an educated guess. To achieve this, we'll examine the 5 criteria and determine which aligns. 1. Social interactions. Does Elon struggle with nonverbal cues like facial expressions and gestures? There have been instances where his emotional
Sarcasm? Yes.
responses seemed a bit offbeat, but to really answer this, we ought to know the way he interacts with his closest friends and family. Difficulty forming relationships? I would argue against this, considering he's dated some pretty famous faces, got a ton of employees backing him, and is pretty much a media magnet. Emotional reciprocity? He's got stories floating around about not really tuning into other people's feelings. Like that bit from an employee we mentioned before. But again, to get the real scoop, we'd need a peek at how he rolls with his inner circle. 2. Repetitive behavior, Elon's obsessions? Well, space, electric cars, tunnels, and Twitter. They're definitely intense and specific. The way he pursued Justine also fits under this criterion. His propensity for setting almost impossible timelines and his reactions when things don't go as planned can be signs of the rigid adherence to routines and patterns. From insisting on the use of lightweight aluminum for Tesla's Model S despite the industry's reservations, to personally interviewing the first 1,000 hires at SpaceX, he's been hands-on in ways that most CEOs would balk at. This persistent immersion and commitment to specific details might be reminiscent of the intense interests or repetitive behaviors often observed in individuals on the autism spectrum. Stereotyped motor movements? Haven't seen him hand-flapping during a rocket launch, but who knows? 3. Impairments. While some hint at Elon having social challenges, he's rocking the tech and business world like a boss, so I don't know about that. 4. Language skills. Mr. Musk certainly exhibits some speech elements.
I appreciate it more. Yeah. Babies are awesome.
Characteristic of the ASD. He can sound rather monotonous or robotic at times, even during the most enthusiastic of times. I'll mention 2 stories to underscore the one-sided verbosity aspect of his speech. During his late teens, Elon Musk formed a close relationship with Christy Nicholson, the daughter of a business mentor. Recalling their initial interaction, Christy mentioned even though they'd never met, he sat her down on a couch and the second thing he said was, "I think a lot about electric cars. Do you think about electric cars?" The second story is about him courting his second wife, Tallulah Riley, as she recalls. After their initial meeting, the two decided to have lunch the following day. Their outing continued with a visit to a contemporary art gallery, and eventually ended up at Musk's hotel room. He then told Riley, a virgin, that he wanted to show her his rockets. "I was skeptical, but he did actually show me rocket videos," she said. Both stories mentioned highlight his tendency for one-sided verbosity, diving deep into topics he's passionate about without necessarily gauging the listener's interest or context. It's these distinct speech patterns and interactions that further paint a picture of Musk's intricate personality. 5. Learning and curiosity. This one pretty much says it all, but let's dive into one more tale. Elon famously delved into numerous rocketry textbooks before launching SpaceX, even going so far as to study obscure Soviet manuals that few had even heard of. However, there's more. At the beginning, Musk leaned heavily on textbooks for his foundational knowledge on rocketry. Yet, as SpaceX continued to bring on brilliant minds, Musk saw an opportunity. He began tapping into their expertise directly. Kevin Brogan, an early SpaceX engineer, recalled moments when Musk would corner him, inquiring deeply about specific valves or unique materials. Brogan initially felt it was a test of his knowledge, but he soon realized Musk was on a mission to learn. He would quiz you until he absorbed 90% of what you know. Many who've interacted closely with Musk vouch for his astounding ability to soak up vast amounts of information and recall them almost flawlessly. This talent is not just impressive, it can be downright intimidating. This ability hasn't waned since his childhood days of voraciously reading. After just a few years at the helm of SpaceX, Musk had transformed into an aerospace expert, reaching a depth of knowledge rarely seen among tech CEOs in their respective industries. In our evolving understanding of autism, the shift from a categorical approach to a spectrum-based perspective in the DSM-V underscores the complexities and variations inherent within neurodivergent conditions. Elon Musk, with his various intricate behaviors and patterns, serves as a prime example of why it's essential to avoid simplistic labels or reductionist views. Certain facets of Musk's behavior and communication may resonate with characteristics typically seen within the autism spectrum. However, to confine him strictly within those parameters based on public interactions alone would be a gross oversimplification.
Simple psychology is bad psychology.
Like all individuals, he exists on a continuum where certain traits may align with what we understand about neurodiversity, while others might not. The crux of the matter lies in understanding the early developmental years and the intimate personal interactions of an individual, areas that remain elusive in Musk's case. Without this comprehensive insight, any assertions about his neurotype are dangerously close to pop psychology and armchair diagnosis, driven more by media sensationalism than sound clinical judgment. Diving deeper into the fabric of mental health, especially with conditions like ASD, it's essential to recognize the numerous theories surrounding its mechanism.
All geometry, knowing all the angles.
Grasping these theories shows how tough it is to guess about the psychology of people like Musk from a distance. The mind, as we know, is not a simple machine with a straightforward manual. Instead, it's a vast, interconnected web, where multiple factors play pivotal roles in the manifestation of behaviors. While we often associate patterns of behavior with certain neurobiological observations, it's crucial to understand that making a direct cause and effect link is no easy feat. The spectrum of theories in autism ranges from genetics to environmental factors, to intricate combinations of both, and while some have more evidence backing them, none can claim absolute certainty. I'll walk you through some of the leading theories in the coming sections.
My theory is...
Firstly, let's dive into the most noteworthy biological theories that give weight to the ASD being influenced by conditions affecting the central nervous system, CNS. ASD has been linked to intellectual disabilities in a significant proportion of cases. Moreover, up to 25% of individuals with autism have been identified to also have other medical or genetic conditions, like Down syndrome, phenylketonuria, epilepsy, or fetal alcohol syndrome, and thus indicate a disorder of the CNS. Notably, the most prominent biological alteration in autism is seen in the neurotransmitter serotonin. McBride in 1998 pointed out elevated serotonin levels in the serum of individuals diagnosed with ASD, and this finding was echoed by other researchers. In 2009, Goldberg and his team discovered that serotonin levels in certain brain areas were lower compared to a control group, whereas the platelet serotonin level was notably higher. These studies show that something's amiss in the serotonin pathway in individuals with ASD, not only in the brain, but throughout the whole body. This can also partly explain the beneficial response seen using SSRI antidepressants for addressing social symptoms in individuals with ASD. SSRIs modulate the serotonin response of the body.
Yo, Prozac? Zoloft, it's similar.
Moving on to the bond between DNA and the disorder, explaining some of the genetic theories. Evidence from familial and twin studies points towards this robust genetic link. The difference in autism rates between identical, monozygotic, and fraternal, dizygotic, twins, sharing the same X chromosome provides a compelling argument. 3 twin studies, in fact, showed a big concordance rate for autism in identical twins, up to 89%. In contrast, the concordance in fraternal twins was almost zero. To put it simply, if one twin has a blue toy, it's highly likely the other twin will have the same blue toy. However, in the case of non-identical twins, this might not be the case. Further strengthening the genetic theory, familial studies indicate a 2.5 to 3% autism rate among siblings. To put that in perspective, this rate is 50 to 100 times higher than in the general population, so siblings of children with autism have a much higher chance of having it compared to the general population. The twin studies essentially show that familial aggregation in autism spectrum disorders is more rooted in a shared genetic base than in exposure to identical environmental factors. Baron Cohen came up with a thought called the assortative mating theory. It's like when 2 people who have something in common have kids, their kids will likely have that thing too. Here are some common features. Being really good at spotting patterns, they ace a test called embedded figures test. Having a dad or granddad who's an engineer. Brain scans show both parents think in a very systematic way. Science students, engineers, mathematicians, physicists have more relatives with autism than humanities students. Mathematicians have a higher rate of Asperger's disorder compared to the general population.
Great. Numbers and dates and numbers and numbers and dates.
Next up, the complex landscape of autism's neuroanatomy. Among the various findings, there's been significant attention on the mesocortex, which is ancient in terms of evolutionary development. This encompasses parts of the frontal and temporal lobes, neostriatum, and cerebellum, and had areas of lower than normal volume, and a substantial 90% of anatomopathological studies observed a decrease in Purkinje cells. Interestingly, these areas play crucial roles in sensory processing, attention, and voluntary coordination of muscle movements. This revelation underscores the potential link between specific neural alterations and the behavioral manifestations commonly observed in autism. A massive 90% of children with ASD are found to have a larger than average brain volume. This results from synaptic pruning failure during brain's development. Synaptic pruning is the process by which the brain gets rid of unnecessary connections between neurons to make the remaining ones work more efficiently. As we grow and learn, our brain decides which connections are important to keep and which ones can be let go. These studies pointed towards a hyperconnectivity of the brain. This hyperconnectivity isn't just a fancy term, it carries profound clinical implications. For instance, this increased, but disorganized, connectivity can lead to sensory overload and intensified cognitive and motor processes, explaining the specific repetitive behavior and thoughts seen in ASD.
And such big brains.
Lastly, we'll take a quick overview of the most important neuropsychological theories. 1. Facial expression and perception of social stimuli. Understanding and integrating information about someone's facial expression and voice is crucial for social interaction. People without developmental issues naturally combine facial or voice information when perceiving another person's speech. However, emotional expression in voice and face might not always align, especially in complex social situations. Recognizing these inconsistencies and responding appropriately is vital. Research highlights neural bases for facial expression processing involving the right fusiform gyrus, superior temporal sulcus, and the amygdala. These areas light up in people with typical development when they look at faces. But in children with ASD, there's an unusual activation pattern. 2. Theory of mind, Tom. One of the earliest and well-known theories related to autism is the theory of mind. It explains our ability to assign beliefs and desires to others, helping us understand their behavior. People generally develop this ability around 3 to 4 years of age, and it often correlates with their verbal skills. Brain regions activated during TOM tasks differ between those with ASD and those without. In ASD individuals, there's more activation in the ventral frontal region, while the control group has more activation in the medial prefrontal cortex. 3. Theory of hypersystemizing and hypoempathizing. In 2005, Baron Cohen proposed this theory to shed light on the social relational deficit in ASD. The theory delves into several overlapping concepts, aiming to explain social relation deficits. These concepts include systemizing, analyzing and identifying rules, empathy, understanding others' feelings and thoughts, TOM, mentalizing, mind blindness, and mind reading. Baron Cohen classifies ASD into different levels, from high to low functionality. They all share the same social expression: difficulties in relating, obsessive interests, and repetitive behaviors. Several theories aim to elucidate the origins of ASD, encompassing areas like neurochemical, immunological, toxicological, oxidative stress, hormonal, mitochondrial, among others. However, the ones I've discussed are the most researched and widely recognized. Alright, so we've gone deep diving into Elon's world, lining up snippets of his life with that official autism checklist from the DSM-IV and DSM-V. Then, we shifted gears and chatted about where autism might come from, those mind-bending etiopathological theories. Here's a speedy recap. There are noticeable anatomical shifts within the brain. There are disruptions in how neural networks function. Irregularities emerge during development processes of the brain. While the quest to decode ASD continues, interpreting the nuances of Elon Musk's life through this lens shouldn't slap a label on him, but should instead remind us of the countless ways neurodiversity manifests and enriches our world. Whether he's rocket-fueled by autism or just plain genius, he's changing our world, one space launch at a time. And remember, folks, whether you're looking at the stars or down at your shoelaces, we're all a little bit peculiar in our own way. So, be kind, be curious, and never forget to have a scoop of your favorite ice cream while you're at it. Craft your brain. Subscribe for more.